Hare Krishna. Some of the most recent resolutions passed by the GBC, and thus now ISKCON policy, are all about encouraging devotees to take up the service of diksa-guru. And the reason for that is to help with the expansion of ISKCON, the expansion of Srila Prabhupada's preaching mission. Srila Prabhupada roughly had 5,000 disciples, and some of our ISKCON gurus have more than that. But of course, everybody has their limits. And ISKCON currently has a similar number of devotees serving as diksa-guru as we had back in the 80s, so 30 or more years ago. And that's somewhere, just under 100 gurus serving. So that's what we had way back in the 80s, and that's currently what we have also. However, the amount of devotees that are now part of the ISKCON mission and ultimately will, want to take initiation, that's grown 50-fold. So we do have an acute lack of diksha-gurus, and it's becoming an ever-growing problem to be able to facilitate the increasing number of aspiring devotees who are now engaged in devotional service. So as I say, we have thereabouts 100 gurus, yet an active congregation of over 10 million devotees. So that would mean that in order to facilitate that amount of devotees, each guru would have to accept thereabouts 100,000 disciples. And that just then deals with the devotees that are currently aspiring for initiation. It doesn't really deal with future expansion. And like everything connected to spiritual life, things are unlimited. Things are always increasing and expanding like that. So yes, we have an acute lack of diksha-gurus, and it's a problem that we really have to address. And if that wasn't enough, then the present generation of diksha-gurus, the ones who are serving as diksha-gurus right now, they will be drastically reduced within the next decade. And of course, in the not too distant future, they will disappear altogether. Tide and time wait for no man. So that's the same for all of us. Time moves on. So we've got to do something about the already acute lack of diksha-gurus before we start losing more and more of those currently serving as diksha-gurus. So ultimately, the expansion of diksha-gurus in ISKCON is a key ingredient, a key part of Lord Chaitanya's prediction that in every town and village of this world, the chanting of my holy name will be heard. So in order to do that, we have to have devotees who are preaching. And once you have devotees who are preaching, if they're not initiated, they will, in due course of time, wish to be initiated, want to be initiated, and rightly so. That's all part of the process. So putting in place more and more gurus will also have the added benefit of kind of demystifying the current diksha-guru dynamic that we have in ISKCON. I mean, it's a simple logic that the fewer you have of anything, the more kind of precious they become, if you like, the more rare they become, the more unique they become, and it kind of creates a whole, I would say kind of excessive focus on those fewer who are serving. So having more diksha-gurus will also help to demystify that current dynamic that we have in ISKCON as it relates to the diksha-gurus. So as Srila Prabhupada, he stated that we should have millions of acharyas in ISKCON, and that also, as well as having millions of acharyas, that everybody should become a guru. I want all of my sons and daughters to become gurus by such and such a time. So Srila Prabhupada is very much, wanting all of his disciples to take this responsibility, and indeed, obviously, future generations of disciples, grand disciples, etc. And we serve as the postman. We just deliver the message, deliver the letter as it's been given to us. The Vedas indeed describe that a guru is someone who repeats just one sentence of spiritual knowledge to another human being. So that means essentially that every member of ISKCON and the Krishna consciousness movement is already a guru. In 1975, I think it was, in Mayapur, Srila Prabhupada gave a class, and he was concluding the class talking about the principle of an acharya, and he said that now we're 5,000, or 10,000. So soon we'll become 100,000. Of course, the devotees were getting excited, 100,000 devotees on the planet. Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And then Prabhupada went on from 100,000, he said that, and soon we'll become 1,000,000. And of course, he had an even bigger Jai Prabhupada when he mentioned 1,000,000. Then he said we'll become 10 million, and then we'll have 10 million acharyas like that. There will be no scarcity. So Srila Prabhupada was really, really clear on this principle that we want, ultimately, I guess, whatever it is, 7.5, 8 billion human beings on the planet, we want every one of them to be a devotee, and then every one of them to be a guru. So we should never be thinking that this should be limited. This should be increased as much as possible. Because it's very, very clear that Srila Prabhupada wanted many gurus serving. And also the tradition of the Gaudiya Math, if you like, our Gaudiya history, is that local gurus, that they're natural, they're traditional, and it's the most sustainable model. It's just this natural idea that you have a kind of village guru, if you like, and is preaching Krishna consciousness, and they naturally become the guru for that village, and accept those people who are qualified to become disciples. So this resolution that I'm going to read now, it's a direct attempt to support those principles, the principle of expansion of ISKCON, the principle of having as many acharyas in our movement as we possibly can, the principle that Srila Prabhupada wanted everybody to be a guru, the principle to have it as natural and as organic, the relationship of guru-disciple, as we possibly can have. So it's really to support all of those principles. So I just now have to quickly put on my glasses and read you this resolution that was passed this year by, actually last year now, of course, 2021, by the GBC body. Okay, whereas connection via Diksha to the Parampara is essential for anyone aspiring to advance in Krishna consciousness. Self-explanatory, I guess. Whereas ISKCON needs a sufficient number of initiated devotees to perform many essential services, which can only be performed by properly initiated devotees. So there are various services that fall into this category. The one, particularly if you're involved in taking responsibility in ISKCON, managing a temple or something, the one that immediately jumps to mind, of course, is deity worship. That you have to be an initiated devotee to engage in deity worship. Whereas ISKCON still has a similar number of diksa-gurus as at the end of the 1980s. Plus minus 80 is written here, a little under 100. While the number of aspiring devotees in ISKCON has increased at least 50-fold or more since then. Thus, an acute lack of diksha-gurus has become an ever-growing problem to facilitate the increased number of persons now engaged in devotional service. So I already talked about that earlier. We've growing numbers of devotees who are participating in the Hare Krishna movement in ISKCON, but yet we've either the same amount or even decreasing amounts of people, devotees, serving as diksha-guru to facilitate that increasing number of devotees who will want to take initiation. Whereas the present generation of diksha-gurus will be drastically reduced within the next decade or so. Thus, a new generation of diksha-gurus urgently needs to be established in ISKCON. Again, I also reflected on that point. And another point here to add, actually, also, is the good that we have new devotees taking on this service of new diksha-gurus taking on this service. And the reason for that, of course, is that those who have been doing this service for many, many years, while they're still with us, they can help to train those devotees up, to answer any of their questions and all of that way, to assist them and all of that. Whereas if you just wait until all those gurus have left, these devotees, they don't have that resource will be gone. Whereas ISKCON's demography has changed from ashram living to largely being a movement of congregational devotees centered around communities. There is an increasing need of a more natural and organic diksha-guru culture in line with Srila Prabhupada's statement in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila 135, in the purport, and I'm quoting, "Generally, a spiritual master who constantly instructs a disciple in spiritual science becomes his initiating spiritual master." So this hasn't been the case in ISKCON. I know for myself that the people who preached to you, the people who brought you to Krishna consciousness and nurtured you in Krishna consciousness for your first days, weeks, months, and even ongoing, that when it got to the point of you taking initiation, then you had to seek initiation from somebody else. And oftentimes that person, you didn't know them. They might oftentimes living in a different country, etc., etc. So that isn't really natural and organic. Much more natural, as Srila Prabhupada is saying here, that whoever is your prominent Shiksha Guru would also become your Diksha-guru. Next one. Whereas we can observe, for different reasons, a clear change in the social culture of the world, and therefore cannot take it for granted that smooth travel all over the world will be possible in the future. Thus, an increasing number of more locally accessible Diksha-gurus, each having a moderate number of disciples, will be more sustainable and will strengthen our preaching movement as a whole, as well as local preaching projects. Yeah, it's interesting. In the last 2 years, of course, with the whole coronavirus or COVID pandemic, international travel has come to a standstill. Now it's starting to get going again, but who knows what's around the corner? It may kick in again. So that's one thing about travel, which is required. If you only have sort of 100 gurus serving the whole planet, then obviously they're going to have to travel. So that's one thing. But then, of course, even more maybe important, and also we live in this world, so we have to be seen to be doing the right thing. But the environment, how justifiable is it for us to be jumping on planes every other day or every other week, traveling to different parts of the world? Srila Prabhupada did it. Of course, the whole environmental issue wasn't really as well known in those days. But also Srila Prabhupada is Srila Prabhupada. He was starting this mission. It was an emergency situation. So for him to circumambulate the globe 11, 12 times, whatever it was, that's a whole different thing than us doing that in the present kind of circumstance. So much more healthy, really, to have more Diksha Gurus living locally, initiating devotees locally, where there isn't that need for all of that travel and to be adding to the environment and then being criticized for that. And that could also become an impediment to our preaching if people see us as environmental terrorists or something like that. I remember, actually, just on that point, it is interesting. I remember the very first night that I stayed in a Hare Krishna ashram in a temple. The next morning, getting up and going to the bathroom to brush my teeth. That a devotee came in after me. I was brushing my teeth. I had the tap running, and the devotee leaned over, turned the tap off, and said, "Prabhu, don't waste Krishna's energy." So in that sense, we're the original environmentalists anyway. The environment and nature is Krishna's energy, and we shouldn't be abusing it or misusing it in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, having more locally based, more gurus in general, and more locally based gurus will greatly help with that. But it will also fulfill this statement from Srila Prabhupada in that Chaitanya Charitamrita purport, that it's natural for the person who gives you shiksha to then eventually become your Diksha Guru. And then the last one, whereas a considerable number of the local spiritual masters who constantly instruct their disciples in spiritual science are often not disciples of Diksha Gurus who have left this world. There's another resolution actually allowing for devotees whose gurus are still physically present, that they can, as long as they get the permission of their guru, get the blessings of their guru, that they then also can serve as Diksha Gurus. There is some statements from Srila Prabhupada about the etiquette, that you can't just go out and start initiating without your guru giving you that permission. But of course, the higher principle is, if the guru gives you that permission, and for the expansion of the Hare Krishna movement, for the expansion of Srila Prabhupada's mission, that's a higher principle than the etiquette that is stated. So as long as the spiritual master is willing to give his blessings, then devotees can initiate even while their guru is physically present. So that's all the whereases. And then the resolution itself reads, the GBC hereby states their commitment to increase the number of Diksha Gurus in ISKCON by systematically and promptly increasing the number of diksha-gurus before we lose our present gurus. The GBC also accepts the principle that the number of diksha-gurus must reflect as closely as possible the actual size of ISKCON, and that the future system leans to having many local diksha-gurus with fewer disciples, rather than having a limited number of international gurus with many disciples. Furthermore, the GBC members will support and promote prominent Shiksha gurus initiating while their Diksha gurus are present. The GBC will support programs that facilitate more Diksha gurus while the present Diksha gurus are still with us. So the whole thing already expressed, it's to help with the expansion of ISKCON, the expansion of Srila Prabhupada's preaching mission. It's to create a more natural, organic system of guru-disciple relationship with local gurus like that. And this idea of having, rather than what we have now and have had for, the last 4 or 5 decades, having very few Diksha gurus with an awful lot of disciples, we want to have many, many, many more Diksha gurus with fewer disciples. That's the goal of this resolution and why the GBC passed it. So please, everybody, look at this, read this again. You'll find it out there on various websites, etc. And see what you can do to help make this a reality, fulfilling Lord Chaitanya's prediction and also fulfilling Srila Prabhupada's prediction of having millions of acharyas. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.